Hey, Kathleen here. So if you're liking these episodes of Crime Story, the best way to support our show is to like, subscribe, and comment on our channel. It really helps people find the show. So thanks again for listening, and now on to the episode. Gilbert King was the first interview that I did for Crime Story. His podcast, Bone Valley, was out in the world and making a huge impact. Bone Valley is the story of a man named Leo Schofield, who'd been convicted of killing his wife, Michelle, in 1987. Despite maintaining his innocence, Leo spent 36 years in prison. Not only was there physical evidence indicating that another man named Jeremy Scott was actually the real killer, decades after Michelle's death, Jeremy actually confessed to the crime to Gilbert on tape.
I first apologized to her, but she went screaming and panicking and stuff. And that's when I guess I lost it then.
Since Bone Valley came out, a lot has happened. The most significant is that Leo Schofield has been released on parole and is back with his family. And now Gilbert is back with season 2. In season 1, Gilbert becomes friends with Leo. And in season 2, he does something even more unexpected. He gets to know Jeremy Scott, the man who destroyed Leo's life. And something unexpected happens during our interview too. I get a chance to talk with Leo himself. I'm Kathleen Goldhar, and this is Crime Story. Gilbert, welcome back to the show.
Oh, it's great to be back. Thanks, Kathleen.
So listeners of Bone Valley and those who heard our interview will know this, so I think we need to be brief. But I wanted you to just give me a sense of what really happened to Michelle.
Yeah, I have no doubt. I've been looking into this for well over 6 years now. And what ended up happening was just sort of a very obvious thing. Michelle disappeared on the evening of February 24th. She was on her way home from work, and she was going to pick up Leo at band practice. And she called at 9:45 p.m. and said, I'll be there probably in 15 minutes. And she never showed up. And she was missing for 3 days until they finally found her body in a canal. There was no evidence really connecting Leo to this. It took a year and a half to really file charges, but a very aggressive prosecutor said, gotta be the husband. They had a history of having fights. People had seen them at big arguments, and they canvassed the neighborhood. And one of the witnesses across from Leo's trailer said that she saw Leo carrying something heavy and putting it in the Mazda that night. And that really started the whole investigation. That made Leo's trailer the crime scene. And basically, he had a really lousy defense attorney, and he got convicted and sentenced to life. And the thing that really bothered everybody who looks into this case was that there was fingerprints that were found in the Mazda that Michelle was driving when she disappeared that were never identified. They tried to do manual comparisons, didn't match Leo, didn't match Michelle or anybody else. They were just unidentified for 17 years. And then after 17 years, the prints got run, and they came back to a man who was in prison for another murder, killed multiple people, and he lived about a mile away from Leo and Michelle in the same neighborhood, and he wasn't in prison at the same time. And this sort of propelled the case for a little while, and ultimately this man named Jeremy Scott confessed to killing Michelle back in 2016. And he's never wavered from that. And so there's 2 men in Florida connected to the death of Michelle Schofield. One of them, Leo, says, I didn't do it, has always maintained his innocence. And another man who said, I'm the one who did it. I'm connected to the crime scene, and I'll tell you how I did it. And the state of Florida doesn't believe either one of them.
And we get introduced to Jeremy in Bone Valley season 1. But season 2 is really focused on Jeremy and what you and him what you uncover, what he tells you, sort of the evolution of that. Tell me a little bit about deciding to do season 2. Was it a complicated decision for you? Did you sort of always know that was going to be where you were going to go? What went into making that choice?
No, it was a really hard decision. First, the first thing is I don't know how close I want to be to this killer. I recognized I've done a lot of research on his killings. I knew he was a really impulsive and violent individual. I knew that he had certain mental health issues, and I didn't really know how close I wanted to get to him. But I did want to interview him, which we did at the finale of season 1, and I think it was a really interesting interview because I felt he was extraordinarily honest and remorseful about what he'd done. He didn't strike me as somebody who was trying to take credit for a murder that he had nothing to do with. I mean, he's forensically connected to the crime scene. So that was like credibility number one. But then I just was really struck by the way he got emotional and crying, basically saying, nothing I can do will bring Michelle back, but at least her family will know that I'm the one who did it. And if it could help Leo get out of prison because he's innocent of this crime, I did it.
I dream, I wake up, I turn over, I see a dead body sleeping next to me. I sleep with dead bodies every night when I go to bed. That's my punishment.
After that interview, I stayed in touch with him. He continued to write me. He said, "You're the only one I talked to." And I asked him more questions about, I thought he killed another person that he never got caught for. And I said, "I need your help with this. Can you tell me everything?" And he wrote me this 6-page elaborate letter that filled with detail. He even drew a map of the crime scene.
Of this other person.
Of this other person, a
Wow.
cab driver.
Yeah.
About 6 weeks after he killed Michelle. And he didn't get caught for this one either. And, he was connected to the town where it happened. Everything made sense that he was telling me. And I went into the sheriff's office, the state attorney's office, and I couldn't get anyone to take it seriously. And it really bothered me. And so I kept going back to Jeremy. I need to know more details. I need you to tell me exactly the moment of murder. Like sometimes these guys don't want to go there. It's interesting, Kathleen. Sometimes they'll take you right up until the point of the murder, and then they'll say, "I lost it," or, "I can't remember what happened, but here's what I did right after." And it's filled with details. And I think he didn't want to confront that moment where he had to recognize that I killed a person.
Yeah.
But this time I asked him to do that. I said, "I need a lot of detail. Are you willing to do this?" And he said, "Look, Mr. King, I can be charged for this murder, but that's okay. I'm never getting out. I want you to know." And he did that. And then, after he did that, I've just stayed in touch with him. And sometimes our conversations were about books that I'd send him. We talk about books. Sometimes we just talk about his health, how he was holding up. He's a troubled man. But it was really complicated to decide, do I really want to go into that side of the story? And I talked to Leo about it. And Leo, I think, gave me permission. He said, "Gilbert, I'm proud of you. Jeremy's a part of my story too. And I want him, treated with care. I don't want him treated the way the prosecutor treats him and just try to tear him down and calls him crazy and not credible. Like, he's a human being too." Leo was really, really articulate about it. He said, "I looked at his past. I was expecting this monster, somebody who could do this to Michelle. And this guy's just a damaged human being who's, doesn't know what he's doing. He's got mental health issues, and he's just not the monster I thought he was." And I just thought that was kind of striking. And it wasn't an easy decision because it was a hard story to put together. It doesn't come together in a way that we were really expecting it to do. Was it going to be exploitative? Was it going to be like trauma porn? I didn't want to go into those areas. It wasn't until we were kind of deep in where we figured it started to come together.
Yeah. I mean, and it doesn't have the same narrative arc that Leo's story did. I mean, Leo's story sort of, this is not like to say it wasn't difficult to put it together, but it kind of writes itself, right? It's this incredible natural arc, whereas Jeremy's a little bit more complicated, but certainly worth the effort. And I want to talk to you about Leo's unbelievable ability to take his own hurt out of something and find a human reason to talk. He's the most extraordinary human that way. But I want to ask you a little bit first about Jeremy. Tell me who you found out he was. Where did he come from? I mean, he didn't come from a very great place. He didn't have an opportunity to thrive.
No, he didn't. And that was another thing I want to be really careful about. If you go into his background and you see it, obviously it's horrible. The way he grew up was just horrible. He was abandoned by his mother at birth, given over to his grandparents, who he thought was his mom and dad for years. And his mother wanted nothing to do with him. And his mother was in his life floating around, but he just saw her as an aunt. But she totally rejected him from birth. She was 15 when she gave birth to him, and there was all sorts of issues, and he didn't know who his father was. And, he had an issue where he was with his grandfather, and his grandfather was supposed to be his caretaker when he was a toddler. And he was drinking and backed over Jeremy, probably gave him some brain damage. And then Jeremy was never quite the same after that. So he became a homeless person at the age of 9 or 10.
Ugh.
And he was living on the streets, committing crimes, getting into all sorts of violent trouble that just escalated as he became a teenager. And so when you look at his history of just being shuttled between foster cares and youth detention facilities, it's just an awful story. And, when he's out on the streets, he's robbing people, hurting people, doing drugs, huffing gasoline. It's just a horrible story. And, I didn't want to make it like, well, now we can feel empathy for him. It wasn't that. It was really another thing that people told us, like people in his family said, he does have a conscience. He does have a heart. He does feel these things. He's not a monster. He's just has no self-control. He's got some brain damage and it leads to violent acts. But as I started talking to him, I started to see how much he cared about people and about family. He was longing for this family connection, especially with his son, who he'd never really held in his arms because his girlfriend got pregnant right at the time he got arrested for murder. So he'd never held his young son in his arms, and he'd written letters to him for years that were never responded to, and he just gave up on this son. And then this son listens to the podcast and calls me out of the blue and says, I always thought my father was a monster. I wanted nothing to do with him. I heard his remorse and his broken spirit, and he didn't sound like the monster I'd heard about. I kind of want to get to know him now. And so we use that as sort of a way to sort of propel the narrative. A son trying to meet his father, the father who's just ebullient and ecstatic that somebody in his family actually wants to reach out to him. And he's so careful about it. He doesn't want to scare him away. He would say, Mr. King, so he's heard the podcast. He knows what I've done and he still wants to talk to me. And I said, yeah, he does. He wants to give you a chance. I think he just doesn't want you to lie to him. And Jeremy said, I won't lie to him then. If he accepts what I've done, I'll tell him anything he wants to know. And honestly, in the 4 years that I've been speaking to him, I've not caught him lying to me about anything. The things that he tells me are just legitimate. They're always backed up. Even things that I found kind of hard to believe sometimes, I would look into it. I'm like, I think he's telling the truth about that. And so to me, he was extraordinarily credible. He never once denied killing Michelle, as the state argued that he, recanted his testimony in an evidentiary hearing. He did not recant. It's very clear if you read the transcripts, he never recanted. He misunderstood a question and he responded to it that way. But I just feel he's more credible than the state that's maintaining Leo Schofield's conviction.
Why does the state of Florida, why have they dug in so hard?
I think it's a couple of reasons. Leo has gone to court several times with appeals, and they call him overly litigious. I mean, anybody who is in prison for a life that you swear you're innocent of and you maintain, that you've been wrongfully convicted, if you find fingerprints of a known killer in your wife's car, you're going to try to get that back into court. You're not just going to go, well, they did their best and I deserve to be here. You're not going to do that. You're going to challenge it. And that's held against him. Here they are wasting resources with another fraudulent claim that there's another killer out there. And I find it just totally disingenuous. And they're on this little island because I talk to people all over. Now it's the country, but in Florida, I talk to people. I ask them to look at this case to help me consult and ask questions that I can ask them. And, to a person, they're like, nah, this guy's innocent. It's just so night and day.
Yeah.
But it's just this one little island, the one little circuit that just has doubled down. I think they don't want to admit they're wrong. And now they've just gone so far that they're just calling all these other theories about Jeremy a conspiracy and that I'm a naive writer who fell for this. Come on, do you think Jeremy's family is conspiring with Leo now?
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. So where are things with Jeremy and his son Justin today?
Yeah, well, they are trying to get together. It's complicated because, Jeremy gets himself into trouble in prison at times, and he gets put into solitary confinement where he's not allowed visitors. And he's in one of those situations now. He has a hard time being in general population with other inmates because he's just gotten himself in trouble over the years. And so he's in one of those situations now where he's actually locked up in solitary. Actually, I should back up. He's actually at a a prison hospital right now awaiting surgery. But as soon as that finishes and he recovers, he's going back to solitary confinement. But the day will come, like Justin and Jeremy like continue to write to each other, and they definitely want to meet each other. And I think it's just as soon as Jeremy's status changes in the prison, this will be something that's possible.
The thing that I found about the second season of Bone Valley that I always feel like is what good true crime and crime reporting does is it opens up the possibility that nobody's all bad and nobody's all good and how problematic the justice system is. And I'm not suggesting in any way that we can't punish people to do bad things. And you kind of get into this in the podcast too.
Yeah.
But when you take in an entire life and you show that somebody like Jeremy Scott was constantly let fall through the cracks and that he kind of ended up where he was, if you had a crystal ball, it would be very easy to see whether he was a murderer or not, he was going to end up down a bad path. And then they get into the system that does nothing for them. And you've been doing this for so long. You've been working with the wrongfully convicted. Do you have a sense of what a better system might look like? Canadian and American systems are slightly different, although we absolutely have the same issues. Do you have a sense of what would really actually work?
You know, I can sort of give a roundabout picture on that. It's interesting. Like Jeremy got arrested for a murder in 1985. He was like 15 years old, and he was accused of killing a granny. And you know, there was a judge that made a comment in the newspaper who like seen Jeremy come in and out of juvenile court like for years and years, and he said something to the effect of like nobody was surprised to see this outcome. Like it was escalating. It was eventually going to land here. And then you go, well, he was in the system a lot. People were aware of him. They knew of his problems. And he would just get shuttled into like new foster homes or just sent down to juvenile detention facilities. And I don't think they had any way of like preparing for somebody like Jeremy who had, you know, mental health issues, a really low IQ, some kind of brain damage, extraordinarily impulsive and violent. People should have seen this coming. And the thing that really, from working on this podcast, was just how many victims there were out there. Like if he gets away with something here, he goes on and kills somebody else. And then you just meet the family members who lost their loved ones, so the orphans who grew up without a father. You know, it's just an endless thing. And you know, it goes right up until Leo and Leo's and Michelle's family, all of these losses. And you just wonder, like, this is the price we pay, like all this pain, this ripples of pain. So many lives were destroyed. Isn't it not worth it to just take this one person and say, this guy is going to be a problem? And if we don't step in, there's going to create many problems for people. Like, I can't tell you, like, there was one woman, that young woman, Jeremy sexually assaulted her. And, you know, she ended up like dying at a very young age. She was just never the same after that. And those families are affected. And just like, it's just this ripple of violence. And to understand the importance of trying to stop this sooner, I don't know if Jeremy could ever be rehabilitated and put out on the streets. Like, I don't believe that he can. And he's the first person that will tell you that. But the question we asked was, well, can he be redeemed? And I think one of the things that I ask, you know, prosecutor friends of mine and judges, what's the best thing you could imagine for somebody like Jeremy?
Yeah.
If he's locked up in prison, what's the best possible outcome? And the best outcome is what he's doing, which is taking accountability for the crimes that he's committed, being honest about them, and genuinely saying, I want to help in some way. He's trying to help Leo. He's trying to help the families of the people that he's hurt. And he's also trying to reconnect with family in a way that's sort of honest for maybe the first time in his life. I think that's the best you can hope for. You don't want to see him out of prison. He still has issues of violence in the prison. Like, sometimes say, what are you trying to help this? I'm like, I'm actually trying to get him charged with some crimes. Actually, yeah. I'm not really, but that doesn't mean I can't treat him like a human being. If he's being honest with me and helping me, I can help him in a way that doesn't really compromise my ethics at all.
Leo was sort of part of this whole process for you too. Has he helped Leo in any way? Do you see that coming that way?
I definitely do. I think Leo believes that a big reason that he's no longer in prison is because people believe Jeremy. I think when you listen to his interviews, when you not only like from season 1, which was, I thought, you know, a pretty powerful interview, and you can hear him getting choked up and being remorseful and saying, you know, I sleep with the faces of the bodies I've people I've killed, they come back and haunt me, and it's gotten worse over the years. Like, he's genuinely sincere about that. But like, I think when you listen to some of our conversations, just me and Jeremy talking on the phone, when he just very cavalierly mentions like, how much it meant to him to talk to Leo, and how Leo's words helped him, feel better about himself. And he goes, he says things like, like I ruined his life and I can't believe he's being so generous about this. And it makes me feel so good to hear that he's out free now. And like, he's just very honest in those conversations. And I think it has helped Leo because like, I think people do believe Jeremy, and they believe that Jeremy did kill Michelle and that this is not some conspiracy theory. This is two men who've arrived at this truth between them, one that the state of Florida cannot possibly get close to with verdicts and the law. It's two men working it out on their own, saying, I know you're telling the truth and I know I am too. And we believe each other. And that's the closest it seems like Leo is going to get to true justice.
That scene, for people who don't know, Leo got into a bad motorcycle accident and has been still recovering. And you're in the hospital visiting him, and serendipitously, I guess, Jeremy calls you. And there's a scene of putting Leo on the phone with Jeremy. I mean, that was amazing.
Is he gonna be all right?
I don't know, man. I think he's going to be all right. He's very coherent, but he's got a lot of broken bones. You want to say hello to him?
Yeah.
He's right here.
Hey, Jeremy. How are you, bud?
Hey, you doing all right?
I was in a motorcycle accident with my daughter.
Yeah, what I really liked about that one was it just sort of stayed true to what we've been trying to do with Bone Valley. It's raw. It's not this setup where like, hey Leo, you're about to talk to the man. What do you think? Like going back like the way it would be handled maybe in a TV show or something like that. It was just like, oh sure, I'm visiting Leo and now look who's calling me. Do you guys want to talk? And they both agreed to it. And I just put the phone in Leo's hands, and it was just, it was a surreal moment because I felt like I knew both of these guys and they'd really never talked before. There's just some weird awkwardness. Jeremy's really nervous talking to him. Like,
you could hear the real nervousness. He was very nervous.
Yeah, he was. I think part of it, though, Kathleen, was like he was standing at a kiosk, like a public phone. There was inmates around. He couldn't I think he would have probably been a little bit more emotional. Something of the way he is with me, but there was too many people around and I feel like he couldn't really let himself go. So he kind of said the words like, I hated that this happened. And, Leo knew exactly what he was talking about and, he forgave him. And that meant the world to Jeremy.
And I'm grateful for the opportunity to thank you for telling the truth. I want you to know that I forgive you with all my heart. You got a lot of people that care about you now because you did the right thing. And, it means a lot to me. It means a lot to my family. And I thank you for that. And I thank you with all my heart, bud.
I thank you, bro.
How about Michelle's family? How do they feel about you talking to Jeremy? How do they feel about this idea that people are really coming to believe that Leo didn't kill her?
Yeah, I mean, there's a split in that right now because Michelle's father passed away last year. And he just did not ever want to talk about this. He kind of wanted to put it behind him. But there's two brothers, and they're kind of split on it. The one brother that I'm close to is Jesse, who still lives in Polk County. And he's very supportive. He's like, I believe that Jeremy killed my sister. I trust that you're going out there and doing this with good intentions. And he's just a really great human being. And he's like, I'm not afraid of truth, just tell me what you find and keep me posted on this. I'm really blessed with a lot of the people that have come into my life through this story, and it really goes even to like the side where you would not expect, Jeremy's side. Family members who have been honest with me and trying to help me understand Jeremy. I just felt there's a lot of great intent out there, and it's made me feel better about humanity, to be honest with you. Even digging into the depths of this horrible story, I find that there's things that you can grasp out of this. This all would not be possible without who Leo is. I don't think I could ever told this story, and I don't think people would ever care unless they came to believe that Leo was this person.
It was at this point in the interview that Gilbert told me that Leo was just downstairs and that Leo was willing to talk to me as well. And I really wanted to talk to Leo about everything that had happened to him, about the podcast, about his life after he'd been out on parole. But I really wanted to talk to him about his journey towards forgiveness. Hello.
Hi. So nice to meet you.
Oh, it's so nice to meet you, Leo. How exciting. I didn't know this was going to be happening.
Yeah, and on the 1 year anniversary on that. 1 year out today.
1 year today is the day you got out?
1 year today. Yes, ma'am. 1 year today.
Congratulations.
I was just sitting here with some friends going over an excellent gift that my wife gave me for the anniversary, a photo album with all these pictures in it. I didn't even know I was in all those pictures, but yeah, so we're just doing that together. It's really fun.
Congratulations.
Thank you, ma'am.
I know you've heard this, but you're an exceptional human to be able to get to this place in your life and be the person you are. I'm sure lots of people who love you tell you the same thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate you saying that, but I always want to make sure that people understand that, I said this before in the 2020 interview, that there's nothing extraordinary about me. I'm surrounded by extraordinary people, and I really mean that, because my wife of 30 years has been by my side ever since. My family's been behind me ever since. You can't get here without that, and so it could have been a very different story, or at least an ending to the story without them. And so I want to make sure that everybody knows that I'm not alone in this, and they've helped me to maintain who I want to be, who I wanted to be, even through that ordeal of prison.
Well, I don't think anybody can get to a good place in their life without people who love them and surround them and take care of them.
Exactly.
Tell me about Gilbert. What does he mean to you?
Oh my God. Yeah, this guy here, in 2018, I'll never forget meeting him. And when we were first talking about this, I remember telling him one time that, Gilbert, it'll never come back to you in embarrassment, never ever. And you will not find anything that's going to be different from what I'm telling you. It is the exact truth, word for word. And here we are all these years later, and he's done more for this case than any single person has. And along the way, you can't get this deep into someone's life and not develop an affinity for one another. So Gilbert to me is not just a storyteller. He is a brother. He is a friend. I love him as if he was my own family. You got to be careful in saying that, because there's always that journalistic element where you want to be legitimate, but I think we're beyond that now. So yeah, he means the world to me. Gilbert felt these things. The people I'm with right now, they feel it in their heart. You don't get into this story this deep without being able to feel it and the emotion of it. So it's pretty amazing. Now these people are family to me. They're not just storytellers. So no matter what happens from here, what I've already gained from these relationships was well worth it.
How do you feel about season 2 being about Jeremy Scott?
Well, I was excited about that. By the time that was developing, I had to make my peace with Jeremy. I had to do some real soul searching to get to a place where I could forgive him. People will ask me, how do you forgive something like that? I want to say that forgiveness is not about Jeremy. Forgiveness was about me. I had to let things go, because the alternative was to be filled with bitterness, anger, hatred, and those things eat you alive while the person you're hating doesn't even know it's happening. And so for me, it was really about me doing that. And it wasn't real in the beginning. I prayed to my God about forgiving him. And I said, I'm lying because you're God, but I'm going to keep saying this until you make it real in my life. And so I continued praying that prayer, and eventually it became real. And so I was already at that juncture in my life when Gilbert was telling me about season 2 being about Jeremy. I trust Gilbert in the direction he goes in. I know he's doing something for a reason. And I'm excited, not just for me. I think excited is the wrong word. I'm content that Jeremy gets to tell his story, and it's told in a way that's understood, and he's not badgered. You're not going to get things out of Jeremy by beating him in the head with stuff. You have to help make him feel comfortable with telling his side of the story.
Can I ask you a little bit about the process to forgiveness? You said that when you first prayed about it, you admitted to God that you were lying, and he knew.
Right.
Do you have any kind of memory or explanation for that arc? Like, how did you go from lying about it inside of yourself to actually feeling it?
Right.
What happened?
That's
How did that
a very,
work?
very good question. So what happens is, and I'm not really responsible for that arc. Okay. First, I was very sincere about the need that I have to forgive. Okay. So I start there. And when I say I'm waiting for him to make it real, let me tell you how he makes it real. I didn't really know anything about Jeremy at that time. I knew he was a low-functioning individual. He had some struggles mentally. I knew he had a long history of crime, all the way back to the time he was 12. But all those things were outside things. I don't. You can look those up on public record and find that out. What you can't find out is who he was, what his family was like, what his history was like as an individual. Gilbert's digging into this case and he's finding out more stuff and he's sharing it with me. And I'm beginning to get a bigger picture of who Jeremy is. And again, I don't know how anybody else feels. And I'm very quick to tell people that I forgive Jeremy for me. I have no right to forgive him for anybody else. That everybody's got to deal with their own hurts the way that they deal with them. Two things were the catalyst to that. One, by then, I was already the senior pastor of the inmate-led Messianic Christian group at Hardy for a number of years. And so I'm having to be an example to others who know this story is happening because it was a very public story. And, I want to be legitimate before my congregation. That's one. The second biggest part of that catalyst was the things that Gilbert was finding out about him that helped me to paint a bigger picture. And I can tell you as a pastor, if I was outside of this story, if it wasn't about me and I had to talk to somebody else about them in the same situation, how would I advise them? How would I counsel them? Well, like I said, I want to be legit about who I am. And when I have that picture painted by Gilbert, I honest and truly developed some sympathy for Jeremy because he's never been loved. I've been loved the whole time I've been alive. I've always had people who love me, care about me. This guy, his mom didn't want him, and he's out in the street at a very, very young age. So he becomes a product of his upbringing, his environment, and he's functioning with what he's got. And, it's a terrible story. So I see him as a broken individual. And then the final part is, no matter what I do or say, my hatred or hurt toward Jeremy would not bring Michelle back. What I did see in this is because he had the courage to, confess to this, so many people are responding to this story of forgiveness. And I call that Michelle's legacy. Michelle is my first wife. That's part of her legacy. It's like her life was given up so that so many other people can come to know this story of forgiveness. And I mean, I've got people from Argentina, Ireland was the most recent one, all over the world who are responding to this. And I credit that to Michelle's legacy. And so that helps me keep balanced about what I'm doing with that. But I really appreciate that question and here's the test. So, I had that conversation with Jeremy on the phone. It was impromptu. We had no idea he was calling. And I told Gilbert after that conversation, I said, it doesn't get more real than that. Because honestly, when he called and Gilbert said, you want to talk to him? And I'm like, I'm really going through a lot of stuff in my heart at that particular time. Do I want to talk to him? Do I really forgive him? Am I going to, because this is the man that murdered my wife. And I've been through hell on earth because of it. And that's when it became very real to me. It was that in that moment, because that's the biggest test I'd ever have. He and I cannot be best friends. We can't be roommates. I don't want to be that close to him, but I don't want anything bad to happen to him either because it wouldn't serve any purpose. But when we were talking, what I said to Jeremy was sincere and from my heart. I meant that because I'm talking to a guy who needed forgiveness, who needs redemption, who needs to know he counts. And, now his son's involved in his life and maybe there's some balance in that for him. He's never getting out of prison and my wife's never coming back. But because of the sacrifice that she had to make, this story has a really good ending. at least for me, from a believer standpoint. And so that's how I arrived at that. And I wasn't sure until that phone call. After the phone call, I know that my forgiveness of Jeremy is very real.
Well, it's really quite amazing. Where are you at with your effort to be exonerated? Where are you at with that?
Yeah, so I really don't know how to answer that. There are people who are working on it. Senator Jonathan Martin is, he's my biggest champion in that. And I trust in what he is saying and doing to me. When I was in the hospital, I was in a very bad motorcycle wreck, so I've been kind of out for a little bit. But he did come to see me in the hospital, and he told me that they're definitely working on that. But, I have faith. This story doesn't end with this. It's not right for me to be still convicted, and it wouldn't end with, being, out but not free. Well, I don't think that it ends like that. And there's too many people around, including this guy Gilbert and, the whole team. They're just not going to let it go. So at the end of the day, there's so many people watching this, and we want to make sure that they know the story, the big story, which is not me. It's no longer about me. At the end of the day, we're gonna fight for some changes, some social changes in our judiciary, because it needs to change. Things need to change. How we look at prosecutors needs to change. We can't value them on their win-and-loss ratio. We got to value them on their integrity. And if we did that, we'd have men and women who are great. And there are many men and women that are in the system that work with great integrity, but we need to honor them for that, because this shouldn't be acceptable. 36 years of my life have been taken, and you can't give me that back. And so, it's in process. Still fighting, right?
We all heard about your accident when it happened. I know Gilbert put it out into the world, but how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing much better than I was. I'm still dealing with a palsied leg that's got me a little bummed out, and I've had 4 surgeries on my wrist and in need of a 5th one. But I'm really hopeful I get this last cast off. I'm going to be able to play guitar again. That's my biggest thing.
And will you stay off motorcycles?
Oh no, I got 2 more of those. Yeah, sorry.
Sure,
everybody
keeps saying
very
happy.
Well, I may park them and get rid of them, but before I do, I'm going to get on it one more time. And the reason is because I'm not going to let someone who wasn't paying attention to what they were doing dictate what I do with my life. I love riding motorcycles. I always have. I know this was a serious accident. I could have lost my life in it, but I want to get on it one more time and ride it. And if I decide I'm not going to ride anymore, it's going to be because I don't want to do it anymore, not because I'm too scared to do it.
I feel for you. I ride horses, and I've been hurt, broken many
thing.
times, and I keep getting back on, and everybody around me tells me to stop, and I'm like, I'm not. I'd rather die than not ride.
Well, there you go. It's the same thing. Horses and bikes go hand in hand.
They do.
So.
Yeah. Well, Leo, I hope you enjoy that ride.
Oh, I will.
And thank you for talking to me. It's such a pleasure to meet you. Good luck with the fight.
It's a pleasure for me.
And Gilbert, it's so nice to see you again. And
You too,
hopefully we'll
Kathleen.
see you again soon.
Yeah, you definitely will. Thank you very much for having us on today.
As I mentioned at the top of this interview, Gilbert King was my very first interview for Crime Story. If you're interested in hearing that episode, we've linked it in the episode description. And thanks for listening. You've been listening to Crime Story from CBC Podcasts. We release a new episode every Monday, so please remember to follow the show in your podcast app. You can get our next episode a week early on CBC Podcasts' YouTube channel, or by subscribing to CBC Podcasts' True Crime channel on Apple Podcasts. In addition to early access, subscribers to our True Crime channel also listen ad-free. Crime Story is hosted by me, Kathleen Goldhar. Our producers are Nikki Manfredi and Mitchell Stewart. Sound design by Julian Uzielli and Mitchell Stewart. Audio sourced from Lava for Good's podcast, Bone Valley. Our senior producer is Jeff Turner, our video producer is Evan Agard, and our YouTube producer is John Lee. Executive producers are Cecil Fernandez and Chris Oak. Tanya Springer is the senior manager of CBC Podcasts, and Arif Narani is the director of CBC Podcasts.